Hello, students, and welcome to the new episode of our YouTube online lessons. It's great to see you. And we talked recently, some of my students were talking recently about what kind of topics we're interested in, American history, women in history, and also I know that we're reading a book about a famous kind of Wild West woman in the book Holes, Kissin' Kate Barlow, who's not a real woman, I don't think. But there were many real women in the Wild West that had a big impact on history. And we're going to we're going to talk about maybe the most important woman in the Wild West. And her name was Annie Oakley. So let's get started. Have you ever heard the name Annie Oakley before? Almost every American, even today, has probably heard the name, but maybe not know who it was. Today, we are going to talk about America's first female superstar and someone who showed women that they can do anything and sometimes do it even better than a man. Annie Oakley was a famous markswoman, known for her sharp shooting abilities. During her life, she traveled with her husband all around the USA and Europe, showing off her skills with her rifle, her big gun. At that time, shooting and marksmanship was a male-dominated sport, and men all across the United States were interested in their shooting ability. Women didn't normally participate in that world, the world of shooting. But Annie Oakley had a different upbringing from other little girls. Annie Oakley was born, her name was Phoebe Ann Moses, in 1860 in Ohio, America. When she was just 6 years old, her father died, and her mother had to take care of Annie and her 5 siblings. So it's a big family. The family didn't have much money and lived in a poor house. When Annie was 8 years old, I hit my microphone. When Annie was 8 years old, she started hunting in order to sell animal fur to a nearby shop and meat to nearby restaurants to help make money for her family. She became increasingly good at hunting and was able to help her mother pay off the mortgage on their house from an early age. Very good. When she was 15 years old, a man came to her town by the name of Frank E. Butler. He was a traveling entertainer who was especially good at shooting. He challenged the town that no one could shoot better than him. Annie took up the challenge and won. She was able to shoot 25 targets without missing a single one, but Butler missed one target. Some say he missed it on purpose because he was attracted to Annie. Soon after, they began courting and were married a year later. Annie and Butler began touring the country and showing everyone their amazing shooting skills. Soon, they were noticed by a big Wild West circus show called Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show. The couple joined the Wild West show as partners, but Annie quickly became more famous, and her husband chose to support his wife by becoming her assistant and manager. Their love was stronger than a man's pride. Annie Oakley soon became the star of the show. She would shoot glass balls out of the air. She would shoot through playing cards. And shoot cigarettes out of her husband's mouth. One interesting point was that Annie chose to wear very simple, plain clothes and nothing fancy. Many of the entertaining women at that time would wear extravagantly flashy dresses, but not Annie. She said that she didn't want people to be distracted by what she was wearing. She wanted everyone to focus on her amazing shooting. Annie and her husband stayed with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show for a long time. During that time, they traveled all over the country and even went abroad. They performed in England for Queen Victoria. They went to Spain, Italy, France as well. Over the course of her career, Annie showed people around the world that women can be just as powerful and skilled as men, even more so. Women were capable of handling firearms and becoming great shooters. She encouraged women to learn how to use pistols that they could keep in their purses to protect themselves. She was passionate about empowering women and helping children. As time went on, both Annie and her husband toured less frequently as they got older. At the beginning of World War I, Annie wrote letters to Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson, telling him that she will fund and train a woman's regiment, and that she will also teach American soldiers how to shoot correctly. In 1926, after over 50 years of marriage, both Annie Oakley and her husband passed away within 3 weeks of each other. Both died from natural causes of old age after living a very exciting and loving life together. Annie is now considered one of the most iconic female figures in American history, especially for women interested in sports. Her skills made her famous, and she is remembered as the legendary sharpshooter in the American West. She's also known as being an advocate for women to learn sports that are primarily dominated by men. All right, that's Annie Oakley's story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed writing this essay and also studying about Annie Oakley. There was a really interesting part of her life where someone stole something from the store, and the person was arrested. And when the police asked, "Who are you?" the woman said, "Oh, I'm Annie Oakley." So many newspapers put in the news like Annie Oakley was arrested for stealing something from the store. But it wasn't true. Annie Oakley didn't do that. And so Annie Oakley demanded that all the newspapers take down that story or correct that story. But the newspapers were like, no, we don't want to correct it. And so she sued the newspapers, and something like 45 lawsuits. She won every lawsuit. So talk about a powerful woman with a plan. She sets her mind to something and she accomplishes it. All right, let's look at the vocabulary. So our first vocab word, Our first vocab word is markswoman. A markswoman is a woman skilled in shooting. And shooting is basically shooting a gun. I think for archery, I'm not sure if we say markswoman or marksman for shooting arrows. I think it's shooting from a gun, shooting bullets. Our next word is courting. So if you remember, Frank Butler and Annie started courting and got married a year later. Courting is a kind of traditional word that means to be involved with someone romantically with the intention of marrying them. So you take them on dates, you get to know them, and you get married in the future. So that's courting. All right, the third is extravagantly. Extravagant or extravagantly is in an excessive or elaborate way. So I talked about the extravagantly fancy dress. This means just very excessive. So a lot of feathers, a lot of colors, different types of fabric, shiny, glittery, and so on. And Annie Oakley chose to wear very simple clothes. She was very passionate about her shooting ability. She wanted people to notice her as a great shooter and not as just some beautiful, flashy woman. All right, next is empowering. If you remember, we said she was passionate about empowering women. So empowering means give someone the authority or power to do something. So she kind of inspires women, gives them power to do something. And finally, the word regiment. Regiment is a permanent unit of an army, typically commanded by a lieutenant colonel. Basically, it's a group of soldiers. And Annie Oakley, during World War I, when she was writing letters, she said she wanted to pay for an all-female regiment. And she would train those women as great markswomen, and that they would be a very successful regiment in World War I. Unfortunately, the Secretary of War and probably other military leaders in America didn't follow those ways of thinking. They probably thought that the army should only be men. So her proposal was rejected, unfortunately. Okay, those are the vocab questions and the vocab words. Now let's move on to our discussion questions. I have 5 questions, and feel free to answer or chat about any of them. I always look forward to everyone's answers. So let's look at number 1. Number 1 says, if you could meet Annie Oakley, what question would you want to ask her? What question do you have for Annie Oakley? Number 2, are there any famous female athletes that empower women in your country? Can you tell me about a famous female athlete? Maybe somebody who inspires people? Number 3, what skills do men and women pride themselves on these days? So what kind of skills do men have that they believe gives them pride, that they have, that they're very proud of? And what skills do women have that they pride themselves on? Number 4, what would you say is one of your best skills? What are you proud of? What are you talented with? And number 5, can you think of any other examples of women who became famous in a male-dominated role? So anyone from history, it could be in your country, it could be in any country around the world. But can you think of a famous, an example of a woman who became famous in a male-dominated role? All right. Well, it was really exciting learning, studying, and writing about Annie Oakley. I hope you've had a really great time learning about Annie Oakley, and I hope she's inspired and empowered you to be proud of the skills and talents that you have, and hopefully you'll continue to develop those skills and talents and inspire the next generation of empowered young women. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.